We've been talking together every week for a very long time. And in all of that time, I can only think of maybe two occasions when we came close to putting on the boxing gloves, and one of those was last week. And we talked about, of course, gas extraction and especially about fracking. And you said that was not your department. But this week, the Premier attended, and I'll quote the press release, a major international mining conference where you also attended, though you, of course, were virtually, you were online. And the Premier noted that you were the guy to handle some of the key issues. And that begs the question, is there a shift in your department that brings you into the mining sector?
No, mining's always fell under natural resources, Bill, and with the changes last year from in December when the new cabinet was announced, natural resources was split up. The energy side and the gas side would have went to energy, and mine stayed with natural resources. And part of that is because of the critical mineral strategy that we talked about a couple times last year that we released in March of last year. It was a project that needed some steady focus on it. It was in our platform about availing critical minerals, and that's sort of been assigned to me from the Premier to look at what critical minerals we have in the province, what can we add to the list, and how can we adapt to the ever-changing world in the green energy spectrum. We know we have the lithium in Nova Scotia. We know that there's many stakeholders, Mitsubishi, Ford, that are looking at coming to Nova Scotia because of lithium deposits. So they would like to help Nova Scotia extract them in a safe manner, environmentally friendly manner, and help to the renewable energy spectrum.
Now, we all know, of course, we should know perhaps, that lithium is a key component that allows cell phones, mobile phones to operate effectively. That's the battery system that we get long life batteries instead of having to run back home and plug them in for an hour every hour kind of thing. So lithium is one of those key minerals you're talking about. But here's the problem. We talked last week about fracking in particular, gas extraction. You said at the time, that's not me, that's the other department. But the Premier said here that we are lifting bans. And I'm quoting, we are lifting bans, breaking down barriers, and inviting good companies to come to talk to us about investing in Nova Scotia. And when we think of lifting bans and breaking down barriers, the first thing that comes to mind in people's hearts and minds is lifting the ban on fracking, lifting the ban on mining of critical other materials that can make money but could be dangerous in the process. And now you are effectively tied to that because he said you're the guy to go to. That's where people are upset.
Yeah, I'm the guy to go to for the minerals. I'm certainly not the guy to go to for fracking, as we talked last week. I've shared our local concerns with the Department of Environment Minister, the Minister of Energy, and I'll carry on doing that. I've heard from, since your interview last week, I've heard from many residents in Cumberland County, but that have some concerns or downright opposed to it, want to have the conversations, and certainly that's my job. I take those voices directly to the minister. And it's a Minister of Environment and Minister of Energy. But what the Premier was speaking about yesterday was specifically about the mines projects that have been talked about. I wasn't in attendance at the expo. I was in attendance at a ministers' meeting that sort of was tied in with it in response to what's going on south of the border. Minister Wilkinson wanted to gather the ministers of the critical minerals and have a discussion of where we're going, because quite frankly, some of the minerals that are coming from the U.S., it could actually be shut off tomorrow. And also is the case with natural gas. We heard yesterday that 100% of the natural gas actually to Nova Scotia that would fuel many businesses in Amherst and Oxford Frozen Foods, for example. That gas could be shut off from the U.S. At a moment's notice now. But yesterday's conversation was strictly about the critical minerals and what takes place there. And the other place that I'm taking the conversation with some of the investors that have been coming here for years are our historical mine tailings that are contaminated sites. And now with new technology, we have some of those investors that are coming to the old copper mines to say, hey, we can help you with your contaminated sites and clean up those tailings and make it a green space, but also extract those critical minerals that Nova Scotia are looking for. So those are the conversations I'm looking for as well.
Now, when you talk about tailings and old mine sites and so on, I mean, it used to be that we were kind of heavy-handed. We'd go in there with shovels and pickaxes, and we'd poke holes in the ground and find the big chunks of copper, the big chunks of whatever it is we were looking for, make a mess in the process and walk away and leave the little bits. And as you say, technology today lets us go back into the stuff that was once considered waste and dig through that, or sift through that, might be a better way to put it, and come up with more valuable products that have increased in value, making the little bits more important, to be sure. But
no, exactly. But I don't want to lead the listeners astray either. It wasn't just picks and shovels, Bill. In some of these cases, it was in some cases. Many decades ago, it was large equipment that were going and they're extracting things that they could, getting out and leaving the mess behind. And there's large messes in some areas. And now, because of technology, we are able to have that conversation of how to clean things up and an economic return to the province as well, not just finances, but an economic return on turning those contaminated sites back to green spaces.
Yeah, I quite agree. I was just trying to simplify it by saying we went in with a heavy hand, and you couldn't get any heavier than the equipment they used to dig and doze, that's for sure. But
and
now,
no regulation to speak of at all either.
Yeah, it was a free-for-all back in the day. That's, the gold rushes that went west and north and all that kind of stuff. I like to think we've learned something from that. But this program also brings something to your department in the form of $1 million coming from Natural Resources Canada, apparently earmarked for 2 projects. What are the 2 projects?
Yeah, so it's going to be identifying some greenfield and brownfield studies on possible safe extraction of minerals, critical minerals.
Can I stop you right there? Greenfield
Yes.
and brownfield, those are in-house terms. What do you mean?
Well, where brownfield would be strictly in very remote areas. Greenfield would be somewhat populated areas. Is there a safe way to do it? So we're looking at this conversation. We've been very clear that we're looking at critical mineral extraction, but it has to be safe to do it. And some of these minerals we've known are sitting here but haven't been extracted from Nova Scotia. So it's part of the study to make sure that there's a pathway forward in a safe, environmentally friendly manner that can also have the green fields return to a green field or a green space afterwards. When you look at other jurisdictions, there's many spots that mines have been turned into national parks. There's one mine site here in Nova Scotia that is looking at creating a closed-circuit hydro dam where the water will continuously fall from one area to another and be pumped back into the other area through hydraulics, and that continuously produce energy for a grid system. It's a renewable energy. It's a closed-loop circuit. And around it, the idea is it's going to be another park around the area that people can come and see this renewable energy at work, which was once a mine site. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on. So this money, it was actually something that we negotiated with Natural Resources last year, but with what's going on at the federal level with looking for a new prime minister this weekend, I believe that some of the conversations were sort of lagged at the end of last year, but it's coming to fruition before the end of the fiscal year. So that $1 million is sort of earmarked for some things, but NRCan from the federal level only got a chance to announce it this week, I believe.
Now, in the press release, the same old. We're going to go back and clean up the tailings and, take an old mine site that really now is a destitute sort of area and possibly turn it green, and hence the terms greenfield and brownfield. You can kind of get something useful from the property once again if you clean it up effectively. But the thing that really jumped off the page for me was trying to get what you call the full value chain in the province. And that doesn't mean just exploration and mining, but in fact in actually producing finished products. That's where we've fallen down in the past. We've always, been fishers of fish and hewers of wood and miners and all that, but all the raw material went to somebody else to make the finished product that we would turn around and buy back again. This, if you can actually deliver on making the actual finished products, this will be a major leap forward.
Exactly, and we'll use the lithium deposits that are in the South Shore and toward Jarmuth area. We know that one of those deposits, for a life of a mine, it's a $6 billion investment. And if we extract that lithium from there, typically that lithium would leave the province for to create the finished products such as batteries. But when you have Mitsubishi, when you have Ford and companies like that looking at our province to come and manufacture a finished product here and be able to utilize the finished product here for, as you say, for our vehicles, our cell phone, our communication towers, there's many battery aspects that lithium is used in. But also with the EV systems that are growing in numbers everywhere. When companies are looking here to invest, they want to make a finished product. And that's a full circle. That's a full economic circle where we can take a raw material that is a natural resource in Nova Scotia, create an economic spin, create more jobs in most of the times in rural Nova Scotia, and have the communities benefit as well. It's a win-win situation, but you have to start the conversation somewhere, and we started that last March when we, in line with Canada, also announced they announced their critical mineral strategy about a year before. But when we put ours on the table, we know we have many of those critical minerals that are needed for the renewable energy spectrum, and that's what we're investigating.
Now, all of this conversation takes place with the backdrop of Donald Trump putting his foot down in a silly sort of way that most people in the world except him would argue is causing a trade war that's going to hurt everybody. And you're talking now, instead of in the way the old days, we'd mine the lithium, send it to the United States where Trump would tax it on its way through the border. And by keeping it here, we start to recognize what it means for us to take advantage of our mineral wealth, our mining wealth, our forestry wealth, our everything wealth, and making every last bit we can from it at home and not sell it to the United States. So you've got this discussion taking place with Trump in the background. Perfect timing for you to sell it to the public.
Well, timing is everything. And quite ironically, we would be having these lithium conversations right now if whether Trump engaged in the tariff war yesterday or not. We know there's a huge deposit there. There's an interest there. There's an interest from stakeholders to come and invest in Nova Scotia. I think it just speeded up a lot of those conversations even faster because of what's going on south of the border. And I mean, it's drastic. I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago, the counterparts that I'm speaking to in the U.S., the counterparts I'm speaking to at the federal level, when we're doing our visits to the U.S., to Washington, reaching out to our counterparts, we're hearing loud and clear, this is not something they want. They know that this is going to be devastating for them as well. So I would certainly hope that Trump would come to his senses and realize that he had a good neighbor in the north. That relationship is certainly tainted. I don't want to tread into the federal politics of things, but look, quite frankly, we are just in the early hours of this tariff trade war. We don't know the full impact, but we do have some money in the budget that for transition and emergency offsets for tariff impacts. Like we are preparing, and quite frankly, at my meeting yesterday with my provincial counterparts, minister counterparts, I heard from a good majority of those ministers that they're looking at Nova Scotia. They were very pleased with a quick reaction from Nova Scotia on our trade war. We started telling people in January what we were going to do. We tabled finances in the budget that are there just in case. Because let's face it, if Donald Trump changes his mind tomorrow and lifts the tariffs, what's to stop him from doing it next month as well? This, to me, I think this is just a game for the president. But we know the real people here in Canada and the real people in the USA are certainly not looking at this as a game. We are going to feel the real impact, but so are the American businesses and consumers.
You know, I don't want to belabor a conversation about Trump because I've washed my hands of the man. He is clueless. You cannot negotiate with Donald Trump. He doesn't know how. He just blathers on, can't remember what he said yesterday, and has no idea what he's going to say tomorrow. I don't want to waste your time with him, but I do want to say this. He has opened the door for us to recognize a critically important opportunity. Crisis brings with it opportunity for people who can see the future and look ahead. And I think you're doing a little bit of that. And I'm really happy in the press releases. You always talk about, effective management of our natural resources, environmental environmentally sensitive to the custodial role we have. Do it right of what's beneath our feet, as you say all the time. We know that that's how you feel and what you believe. But where do we get a guarantee from your government to recognize that, you're not going to turn a blind eye when the, $1 million check lands on the table? You're going to continue to look like you look at the consequences of doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, well, what I could say, Bill, is I can't predict the future for anything, obviously, and I can't change the thought process of any individual. But what I will say is the Minister of Environment is a very well-respected individual, and he stood in the House many times. He stood in front of the media. This is a changing, evolving situation with what's happening to the south. I'll try not to name his name for you, Bill, but there's still a very strong historical reputation that the minister has within his department. That if we are going to do projects, and the Premier said it, we have to do projects safely, or we just will not be doing them. We have to look at the environment. We have to look at the labor. We have to look at every safety aspect, which includes the community's involvement. Our Mi'kmaq partners have to be engaged. There has to be conversations. There has to be reasonable studies that the Department of Environment has to do. And I think the Minister of Environment, who will essentially be the regulator, I won't be the regulator. The regulator will be the Department of Environment, and his strong history, I think, speaks for itself. So we certainly have to trust his abilities to move forward as well.
Well, I appreciate your fond praise of your colleague, the Minister of Environment, and together the two of you, I think, speak the message that the people of Nova Scotia speak. The problem is when the Premier goes off to a major mining conference and says things like Nova Scotia is open for business, and he doesn't tell them there are certain qualifiers to that opening. And, we've witnessed over decades, over centuries, where big business comes in, does what it wants, and then leaves town with the tailings and the mess behind. That's what we don't want.
Yeah, no, I think what I'd say, Bill, is I've certainly listened to your time with the Premier as well, and I don't know if he was on recently. I've been tied up for the last couple of weeks, but
coming coming Monday.
This coming Monday, but the Premier's been always very clear that we have to do it in a safe manner and do the research and do the hard work to find out if it is safe. And I've certainly had no different direction from the Premier, and speaking with the Department of Environment, that minister, he said no different direction from the Premier. So it's all hands on deck, but we have to meet the environmental standards, and Nova Scotians would expect no less of this government or any government of any political stripe. They expect things to be done safe, and a government to look for what the realm of possibility to drive our economic force in Nova Scotia.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And if you can hold the Minister of Environment to task, and hold the two of you can hold the Premier to task, and the three of you will talk to us before you jump, I think people will be happy with that. But I got to tell you, you're treading on thin ice right now.
Well, look, what I'd say, Bill, is that the people of Cumberland County certainly know me, and the conversations I had last weekend. Certainly, there's some people that have some concerns, but they know me. They know Tory Rushton. And they know that every time that they bring a concern to Tory, that I certainly take it to the Premier or the minister that's responsible. And it's a two-way respect. If somebody takes the time to come and talk to me and have that conversation, I'm going to make sure that I take the time and share their concerns with the respective minister or Premier.